Hey, welcome to Southeast Iowa Live's community profile for here in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. I'm Mike Heaton, and I am really excited to be here on the grounds of Old Threshers here in Mount Pleasant with Terry Phillips. Terry, I'm really excited. This week's going to be awesome. Welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why we are interviewing you today.
Boy, that's a question and a half. I won't bring up my probation officer or anything like that. But Old Threshers is part of the host of Preserve Iowa Summit,
Preserve Iowa Summit,
which is a conference of preservationists. 200 to 300 people will be here in Mount Pleasant this week. It starts Thursday.
Okay. So that's what everybody's talking about. All these, is it historians or what are we talking about?
They're preservationists primarily.
Preservationists. Okay.
And that's a label that can mean a whole lot of different things.
Okay.
But the people come together. There's people that do presentations, like we'll be doing a presentation here in the old schoolhouse on how to rehab windows.
And we're in the old Pleasant Lawn Schoolhouse,
Right.
That's in the North Village of Old Threshers right now.
It was built in 1930, and it's a cool building. And one of the things that's cool is Karen stopped by yesterday, a retired teacher. The retired teachers maintain this thing. They clean it up, they get it all ready to go and everything. And it's so cool to talk to somebody like that. And they really appreciate and want to tell people about the history of the building. So it's cool in that part
I
of it.
know some retired teachers here in town that actually taught in this building.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Still, I have friends that went here. They were part of the final classes that were here before Pleasant Lawn closed, and obviously before they moved the building over here.
That's cool.
That's really neat. So before we go into the Preserve Iowa Summit, I want to talk about that in detail here a little bit, but I want to know why we're interviewing you. I know we reached out and talked, and I know you as a friend as well. What you do is really, really cool, and why you do it is really cool. Can you give us just a general overview of what you do, and then we'll get into a little bit about why it's important, especially here in Southeast Iowa.
Okay, so I started out as a contractor many years ago, and I worked on old buildings, basically painting them. And so about 25, 30 years ago, I got more involved in rehabilitating the buildings to make them last longer. And 15 years ago, then I decided to focus on windows. There's hardly anyone in Iowa doing that. And so I took a class down in Hannibal, Missouri, and I've got several employees, and that's what we focus on. We take out old sashes, and that's why I'm here. We're taking these sashes out. And
there's literally no window in this,
right.
in this window.
And there's one back there that's done.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And so we rehab them and put them back in. And the thing about windows that many people don't fully understand is how they functioned 100 years ago. You can lower the top sash and raise the lower sash, and you have a nice breeze coming through.
Oh, yeah.
In the evenings when it's hot, you'll have cool air coming in and warm air going out.
So you're moving, my understanding of basic science from fourth grade, right, is that hot air rises,
Yes.
cool air is low, and so based on where you're opening that window up, you get the movement. It
Right.
starts creating that movement to get that breeze going through. Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool, nice.
And so many old buildings never had air conditioning. Well, they didn't really need that. If you look at these windows, they're really tall.
Yeah.
So can you imagine, last day of school, it's going to be 80 degrees outside today, but it's really nice in here.
Yeah, it really is. I'm actually sort of surprised how cool it is in here right now.
And so the buildings are really good buildings to be in. And today we're talking about making schoolhouses air conditioned and stuff. And okay, I'm not going to argue against that. But what we had years ago, we didn't really need that so much.
Right.
And so what I've got involved with the windows, and what I like to promote is that the old wood in the windows, in the sashes, came from old growth forests up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, or whatever.
Sure.
And that wood is tremendously valuable. It's very, very good. You've seen barns out in the middle of nowhere, no paint on them, been that way for 30 years.
Yeah.
Why haven't they rotted and fallen down? Well, it's the old growth wood. The wood is tight grained because it grew slowly.
Right.
And so it doesn't rot well. It's stronger. It doesn't take near as many inches to hold up stuff. And insects don't really like to chew into it because it's really tight grained and it's hard stuff.
Like
Yeah.
like an oak or a walnut or more hardwoods kind
yeah,
of thing, I'm assuming. Right. Okay.
And so we have that in the windows, and there's a big push to remove old windows and put in replacements. And I start joking about that. We call them replacement windows because in about 15 years you got to replace them again, literally.
Sure.
And so these windows even though people go, okay, there's a broken rope over here and you got to use a stick to hold it up. Okay, we'll fix that. And it'll
Right.
function like it did 100 years ago.
Right.
Or not quite, but in 1930. And it'll last another 100 years.
So let me challenge that. What I hear, and I'd love to hear your reasons why. I actually know your answer to this already, which is why I'm asking.
Okay.
But you know, my initial thought when I first talked to you about this was you know, I know you care about the environment. I know you care about climate change and not overusing energy and energy. You know, all these things. We have these debates about windmills right now in northern Henry County. You know, and energy usage, all that kind of stuff. So in my mind, I would go to, well, why don't we just get better insulated windows? Let's go up to Pella, get some really good customized windows made of plastic and metal and double pane with a special gas inside, all that kind of stuff. And your response was fascinating to me. Can you tell me your
I can't
response?
remember
to
the
that?
response. Okay, so you take an old building, downtown old brick building. It's not energy efficient at all.
Sure.
Okay? And so you think, we want it to be energy efficient because we want to save that energy, we want to save the money. If you tore that building down and you build an energy efficient building, it would take you 60, 75, 100 years to pay for it dollar-wise in energy.
Right.
And
yeah.
no buildings are being built to last that long.
Right.
So you're much better off taking that building and making modifications to it, rehabilitate different things and make it more energy efficient.
Right.
Spend your money for that and find uses for it. That sometimes means that you got to use something that's not quite as convenient. Maybe you don't have handicap accessibility, so you got to do something different. Maybe you got to put in an elevator. Maybe your
Sure.
bathrooms aren't quite. Those are challenges, but they're addressable.
Yeah.
You get an architect who'll come in and say, tear it down, we'll build something new, because it's real easy to do. And
Yeah.
that's one of the problems we have. And we're looking at, okay, what do we want? We want it now, we want this, and we want that. But if we take the time and look at what we've got and try to figure out that, okay, we can make that work. And the real benefit to that is, like you mentioned, climate change. So you tear the thing down, it takes energy to tear it down. Before you started, the carbon footprint of that building was probably nil.
Yeah.
I mean, let's take this one. If you decided, okay, we want to have a modern building here, which wouldn't fit obviously here, but this one, all the energy's been paid for.
Right. And then some already. It's
Yeah.
almost 100
Oh,
years old.
right.
And yeah, like, yeah.
And so if you tear it down, as soon as you fire up the excavator, that footprint explodes.
Right.
And then when you start to build it, you put in all sorts of things that are not really natural. All of this basically in here is natural stuff.
Right, right.
But you'll be putting in all sorts of plastics, you know, the windows, all sorts of things. And one of the things that I find interesting is, I do some reading occasionally, that if you have an old house, you know, 100-year-old house, 2-story house, you probably have maybe 15, 16 minutes to get out of it caught on fire.
Right, right.
In a new house, you maybe have 5 at most.
Right.
And so I don't want to promote saving old buildings because of fires, but sometimes it's worthwhile to look at all the benefits of old buildings. Right. And so I'm really pushing to do this stuff is because it saves all that energy and it's better for the environment, and you don't have to buy an electric car to make a difference in climate change.
See, I love that, and on 2 fronts. One is it actually makes sense. Scientifically, it makes sense to refurbish an old building is better for the environment to put up a brand new one,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's still the same amount of jobs. It's the same amount of economic impact that we'd have because it requires people like you to come in and do that kind of work, right? So we don't lose the economic side of it either, which is fantastic.
Actually, we gain.
We gain.
Because it's local people doing the work.
True. Yeah.
These windows here, I could take them 100 miles away and do that.
Sure.
But I take them up to Washington. You don't take them to Chicago to have them done and bring them back.
Right. We have specialists
Yeah.
around here that can do that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Or
that's
we can
great.
train more people.
What's your company called, by the way? That just does this
Well,
work?
I go by 2 things. TK Enterprises, is the business that I started 60 years ago almost. In Mill Seed in Washington is where I have the building that we work in.
Right. Perfect. So the other number 2, the reason I love it, and this is I think segue really nicely into our second half of our show after the commercial break, is what it does for your community. I lived in Dallas. I lived in Denver. 2 large cities that are constantly doing turnover and they look the exact same now. because they're constantly rebuilding stuff. And it's the same builders, the same designs, all that kind of stuff. I could be in Dallas, as long as you take the distance away where I can't see the mountains. I couldn't tell you if I'm in Dallas or Denver. There's no uniqueness, there's no character, there's no history, there's no culture. And the one thing I love, many things I love about small town life here in Southeast Iowa, is every little small town, from Washington to Mount Pleasant to Fairfield to even smaller ones like Salem, they all have not only a unique history, but that history is shared in the buildings. And you see it, and you pull into that place, and you see the Union Block downtown, or you see an old church and its design. It may not be a church anymore, but you still see it, and you understand that you're in a unique place that's special with its own stories, and then it becomes an adventure. It becomes an experience to go and visit those places. Whereas if I go visit a suburb in Denver, I'm done. I don't need to visit any other suburbs in the entire freaking country because they're all the exact same, with the exact same building codes, the exact same building design, and there's nothing unique about it, right? I love that. And I'm sure that's part of the conversation this week with the Preserve Iowa Summit. And so when we come back from commercial, I want to talk all about that, what it's going to be like, what's going on, what are some of the workshops, and we'll get to that after we pay the bills.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Terry.
At Seafirst Credit Union, we're all about making connections, like how we connect you to that dream vacation with a savings account designed to help get you on the flight there. Connect with Seafirst today and see why together is better.
Bring the kids and share the memories at the 2024 Midwest Old Threshers Reunion. Steam engines, antique cars and trucks, tractors, gas engines, and horses. Great food from the North Village or the Log Village. Plus, learn how to square dance over at the dance bar. This is the place where memories are made. Make plans now to enjoy the history of the past at the 2024 Midwest Old Threshers Reunion, August 29th through September 2nd in Mount Pleasant. Visit oldthreshers.com for more details.
Attention Hy-Vee shoppers, introducing Hy-Vee Perks, your ticket to exclusive savings and rewards. Access exclusive perks, prices, earn gas discounts, and unlock special deals. All this for free. Join Hy-Vee Perks today and start saving.
In the heart of rural Iowa, where community matters most, the connections we make are made to last. Meet KCTC, your hometown internet, phone, and TV provider. At KCTC, we're not just about technology, we're about people. Our dedicated team are your neighbors, committed to bringing you top-tier services right where you live. We believe in giving back to the community that raised us. Experience the power of a real connection with KCTC. Join us in building a stronger, more connected Southeast Iowa.
Welcome back to Southeast Iowa Live. This is Mount Pleasant's Community Profile. I'm here with Terry Phillips, who I would say is our local preservationist. Is that right? Sort of an expert in preservation. What would you title your industry or focus?
Rehabilitation is a key word.
Rehabilitation.
Window rehabilitation technician, if you will.
Nice. And you mentioned sustainable rehabilitation. Is that what the term was that you said earlier?
So we were talking about stuff there earlier, but one of the things I want to mention is that window back there, that was made by a guy 100 years ago, 1930, all right?
Okay.
He was a guy looking for a paycheck. He wanted to make that to last for generations, but he made it for a guy with very limited talents like me to be able to rehab it and put it back in use and it'll last another 100 years.
Sure.
You
Limited
can't work
talent.
on a car
I've
like
seen
that.
you work on stuff. It's not limited talents. It's for the. It takes. It's a unique skill set. But yeah, I hear you.
But the things are put together so they can be fixed.
Right.
They didn't glue anything. They put pins in. You take the pins out, take it apart, put in a new piece. So it's remarkable what they did with stuff.
That's really cool.
And it is so satisfying to know that in your hands you had something that somebody made 100 years ago, and you're just trying to make it last a little bit longer.
Yeah, and he or she knew that you would probably have your hands on it 100 years later, trying to fix it,
Right,
and so
exactly.
he built it in a way where you could.
Yeah.
That's really neat. I'd never sort of realized that before. That'd be really cool.
And it's very satisfying. I've painted buildings for many, many years, and I painted that when I did this one or whatever. But this lasts long. I mean, 50, 100 years is a long time. I probably won't be around to see them be redone again, I don't think.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Nice. But you know who will be is the Preserve Iowa Summit, hopefully 100 years from now, still doing their thing. And we are fortunate enough to have that here in Mount Pleasant this year.
Right.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
So SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office,
Sure.
in Des Moines, arranges for this to be done every year. And they solicit bids, if you will, from communities to do that. And so Mount Pleasant last year was selected, and Joy Lapp and There's several others that's very involved here, and I shouldn't have said Joy because I forget the other names, and now I'm in trouble.
I know the Bainter Thomases are heavily involved
Yeah.
in stuff. I apologize to all. I have a lot of good friends that are involved in this stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
and
it's
so they're
amazing.
all involved in that. And that's one of the great things. That this isn't from Des Moines coming down here telling us about stuff. This is the local community doing that. And so it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday conference. It costs a couple $100 for people to go to it. And the people typically going to it are professionals in preservation. They may be a consultant doing tax credits or something like that. But we have other people who serves on commissions and stuff that want to learn.
Yeah.
So there'll be presentations all through the day, each day, and they'll be overlapping. You'll have 2 or 3 at the same time. And you can pick where you want to go and see what you want to learn.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be doing a presentation tomorrow morning here in the school. And now it's about 20 people and it's full right now, but we're going to be doing some other events at other times where people can come in and see what we're doing. But we'll be trying to show people how you can go about rehabbing windows. I can't teach anybody actually how to do that, but give them an overview so they know they go home that, okay, yeah, this window is worth saving.
That's how it's done. That's
Yeah. And the other thing, then we'll be doing something on Saturday morning where we'll be talking about deconstructing buildings, because I want to save every building I walk into.
Yeah.
But some buildings, that's not practical.
Right.
Okay, so I want to save the materials there. And one of the things I love to do is to get it torn down enough that I can save the 2x6s, the 2x8s in it, that old growth wood that I mentioned earlier that
Yep.
came out of Minnesota.
Yeah.
So this Preservation Iowa, our Preserve Iowa Summit, brings people together. They'll be from all across the state. Last year it was in Sioux City, and so people all over come in here. And it's a great way to get to know people and learn new things, and you make the contacts, the networking, and all sorts of stuff. There'll be architects all over. And it's just a fun time for those of us who are really enjoying old buildings. Now,
You can geek out over it with other people who are geeking out over it. That's a good thing in 2024, by the way. You can be a geek about stuff.
yeah, well, but I want to digress just a little bit here because Pete Franks is an architect, a friend of mine from Glenwood, Iowa, out west. And he and I were talking 3 months ago, and he said, preservation is becoming more mainstream. And I certainly agree with that. And so in this last year or two, I have been in Farmington, which is down south here, not very far away, talked to a young couple that have an old brick building that's well over 100 years old, and they're wanting to save it and do stuff, and they have the Bean Pot coffee shop.
Right,
And
right.
they're trying to make a go of it. And then there's a couple that, out of Des Moines that has a brick house in Stockport that was built in the 1850s. You go on into Fairfield, there's a single woman there that has a house that originally was a brewery about 1850.
Nice.
And it's a house now, and she's wanting to keep it going. You ever heard of Lynby, Iowa?
I know, yeah.
Okay, it's
Tiny little town.
It's not incorporated. It was a
Yeah.
junction of a railroad.
Yep.
There's a single mother there that bought an old hotel. It was a wood frame hotel, and she's making that into a resident. Now, many of these people aren't doing what typical preservationists want to do, and that's to make a museum. All right.
Sure.
They're using the building, and they're making it into something that's very, very usable. And you go on over to Sheridan. So people there have an 1864 building, and they've gotten high school students involved to save this building, make something out of it.
Well, real quick, I love that because then they're not only selling coffee out of the coffee bean, did you say?
Yeah.
But they're selling the story, the
Yeah.
history of that building
Right.
and of that place. And that makes people want to go there. There's a Starbucks in every corner across the
Yeah,
world.
absolutely.
But if you can go to a coffee shop in an old building that has a story, I'm going to that coffee shop because I want to experience.
Yeah.
I don't just want coffee.
Right.
And that's new business. That's economics for Southeast Iowa. Something we need. We need to attract people, attract tourism, attract people to our communities to make a buck, quite frankly, and get those dollars cycling in our community.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff we can talk about. I want to also mention, go clear up to Akron, Iowa, which is about as far away as you can go. You go to South Dakota and come back 500 yards.
Right,
and you're in
sure,
Akron.
yeah.
And they have a building there, an old opera house built in 1906 that is 3 stories tall. And it's got beautiful round windows, and so we're working on that. But those, they're volunteers that have a nonprofit. They've been working on it for like 10 years. They have shows there and stuff. But the cool thing about the building is that in 1906, the insurance company said, okay, if the community buys enough life insurance policies, we'll build you an opera house.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
And they didn't quite make the quota, but they said, okay, you're close enough, we'll build it anyway.
Okay.
And so stories like that are fascinating.
That's
And these
awesome.
are everyday people.
Yeah.
They're not a developer out of Des Moines that buys a hotel
Right.
in Newton and makes it into a beautiful building.
Right.
These are just everyday people making something work.
Yeah.
In Cherokee, there's a 1896 building with Sioux quartz stone on it, beautiful stone. And the second and third floors are empty now, completely empty. But the only thing that's been bastardized there is a PVC pipe that they ran for a bathroom. Everything is original. I mean,
Right,
you're looking
right.
around, you're seeing all this stuff there. And they're redoing stuff. They got people who want to have offices there and stuff. And it's all local people working on things.
I love it. I love it. So it's good for our culture. It's good for our economics. It's good for our small towns and their health and their stories. There's so many positives about preservation.
Yes.
That people don't think about. To your point, like some people just see they just want to build a museum. That's important too. Don't get me wrong. Museums are
Yeah,
important.
I shouldn't have
but
said that
it's-
in here, right?
Yeah, right. Because we're literally in a living museum in many
Yeah.
ways here. But the key there, it's well beyond that as well. It's tourism, it's stories, it's cultures, all those things. And it feels like that's what y'all geek out over the next 3 days when
Right.
you're here. So if I'm just a regular Mount Pleasant resident or from Fairfield or Washington, is there any way for me to participate at this point in the, it doesn't, sounds like you had to register a while back, right?
You did, although there may be some opportunities on Saturday for $10. You can go to some events or whatever.
Okay.
But there's a social event tonight out at not the Airport Winery, but the other one out here. Dave
sure.
Eaton's
Yeah,
sister or whatever. Anyway, I'm sorry, I don't have that right in front of me. And then there's
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure which one that would be. Yeah.
okay.
Go ahead.
I wasn't prepared. I was hoping Joy would be
Oh,
here.
you're
She could
good.
tell
You're
me all
good.
sorts.
Yeah. But those
there's-
are for social for the people coming, right?
Yeah, but
For-
other people come and join in and see
Okay,
what's going
okay,
on. I do want to put a plug for Old Threshers because they've been great to work with.
Oh, yeah.
There's a couple of events out here. They're letting me do this here. They're actually paying me to do some of this here. And so they've been really great to work with. Terry is
Yeah,
fantastic.
they're awesome. I love what he always says about Old Threshers. Like, we're a museum too, but we play with our toys.
Yeah.
We play with our exhibits. But you have to maintain them and keep them
Yeah.
up and preserve them in a way they can be used. That you can open and shut the windows, right?
Right.
They just are with massive steam engines that they have to figure out how to open and shut the valves and
Yeah.
that they don't explode, right?
There is one thing I want to
yeah.
point out, and that is preservationists are oftentimes looked at a little bit differently than normal people, all right? And when people see a building, the building that we have there in Washington, it was like, take a picture of it and tear it down.
This is the Mill Seed.
Yeah.
It's just north of town. Yeah. Gorgeous old building.
And it's like, okay, they see preservation as the opposite of progress sometimes.
Right.
And I'm not being critical of them. That's just a way they're looking at things. I'm significantly colorblind. And so you tell me about this beautiful rainbow out there, and I go, oh yeah, okay, that's good. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I can't see what you see.
Right.
And it's the same way with this preservation. And so, okay, the difference is about sustainability. We love preservation, but more importantly, I want to see that building continue to be in use because it sustains our environment, it sustains our climate, it sustains what we're doing. And no one can really argue against that. And that's what we try to promote. I
love it.
You've heard me on the soapbox a lot, that all this preservation is simply about sustainability.
Yeah, I think that's genius. It's wonderful. And with what we do with the Southeast Iowa Union, not only do they do a great job of sharing the news, they really focus on the story of who we are as a community, representing our towns and who we are. And to me, preservation and storytelling go hand in hand.
Yeah.
It's part of who we are. Old Threshers is part of who we are. And preservation, literally, if we're in the building on Old Threshers right now, it's part of our story. The buildings at Iowa Wesleyan. While we're in a massive transition right now with how those get used, there are a lot of people looking at those buildings and saying, oh, maybe they should be torn down and we should build stuff. But there's a lot of people very strong, and they're in positions where they understand what you're talking about. They say, no, this is important. These buildings are important to who we are, to our identity. How do we repurpose them, as opposed to how do we just move on from it? And I think you're absolutely right. When we look at it like that, not only do we grow and move forward, there is progress, but we also preserve our story and continue our story. We don't just have the same story as every other, suburb in the country where we just have developers come in and be building. It's brilliant. I love it. I obviously I've drunk the Kool-Aid, Terry. It's a wonderful thing, and I think most people in Mount Pleasant get that. We are a very historic, focused town.
And just economically, Mount Pleasant is a small town, but there's smaller towns out there in Iowa. And you start looking at the value of what you have. Many buildings on the square or on the main street or whatever have a vacant upstairs.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to tear up a cornfield and build a vinyl village out there? Why not taking those upstairs apartments and put some money into it, less money than it takes to build a new house.
right.
And then you got a view of downtown. In most places, you have walkability.
Yeah, people are downtown going to shops, going to
Yeah.
restaurants. It adds to the over. And you talk to Lisa Ecken at Main Street, and she'll tell you the same thing. And which is why she's pushed for those and
Yeah.
done them successfully. Built, redone, repurposed buildings downtown, found grants to match with local
Mm-hmm.
investors, et cetera. And it's really great. We got to wrap up. We've
Okay.
hit our limit, I think, a long time ago, didn't we? Sorry, Alex, you got a lot of editing to do here. I apologize. But thank you. Good luck this week with everything. Do you have any final little quick thoughts?
No, I really appreciate you coming over. Once you get this put up, you can help me with the windows.
Okay, just give us a call.
No, you stay.
Oh, today. Okay,
Yeah,
nice,
okay.
nice. All right, thank you, Terry. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.